let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate you all attending. My name is Andrea Hardy, and I am the Manager of Customer Success here at TOPS. And today we're going to be going over one of my favorite topics, which is managing collections. And I know it's quite a task for most of you. So everything that we'll cover today will hopefully give you guys a little more information on how to process and some great best practices for doing your collections. So let's get started. So on our agenda today, we'll look at some of the advantages of using TOPS One for your collection features, and then go through some collection best practices that I've found have worked really well in the past when I was in management. And then we'll go through creating collection actions, really setting up a great foundation, assigning the templates, testing everything out, so that when you do prepare to process your collections, it's going to be a lot easier, just making sure that your framework is set up on the back end. And then we'll walk through how to accrue and edit your candidates, and then post your actions and process your notices. So real quickly, a couple of the advantages. Once you have everything configured, you'll be able to quickly review and process your collections. And additionally, it's going to help you reduce your accounts receivable, which all equals happy board members, which is all the common goal that we're wanting, is to have the least amount of complaints on collections and being on top of everything. Okay, let's review some best practices. So before we get into specifics on using the collection features, I want to look at a few best practices that are essential to ensuring you have your system set up correctly. So the first thing you should do is step one, review the collection policy. And if there's not one for the community, your governing documents will always outline what the collection practices should be, how many days, what the amounts are when they move through the collection process. And then, of course, checking to ensure that all of your templates and language are set up so that when you do process collections, that each one of those letters coincides with exactly the stage that you're at with that. So checking the merge codes. And if you're at the point where you don't have that set up, you can feel free to email us at success@topssoft.com. Your customer success rep is happy to reach out and walk through that with you, just so you guys are sure that you have everything set up correctly. All right, next, we'll move on to the setup phase on the best practices. So it's really looking at the actions, the number of days, and amount thresholds, which is something I think a lot of policies overlook, but we'll go through why that's so important on setting up your collections. And then we'll go through using the collection actions to track non-reoccurring holds, things like resales. When you fill out a resale request and it's pending, you don't want to apply certain fees or collections, so how to track those through there. Things like payment plans, which I know are a big headache for a lot of us on tracking and really following up to make sure those are done correctly. And then there's kind of a catch-all, which I call the temporary hold for those people who call and, the dog ate my check and got lost in the mail, whatever the dispute is, having the ability to track those and put a timer on those through your comments section. So we'll go through on how to utilize that. And then the last part, remember, one of the key things to do before you apply any fees or run reports or process letters that are going to affect balances, make sure, and I'll drive it home, to apply prepaids before you do anything. And then again, also, if you set your steps up, you're going to always want to ensure to apply your late fees or any interest, depending on the community's policy. Make sure that's done before you do your collections. And then the last reminder would be reviewing hold accounts. And I'll walk through how that process would look and how you can easily do that. So on any new property that you're taking on, it's so beneficial to create a checklist of questions that you can have your board or your manager submit this to you so that you have everything set up correctly from the get-go. You'll want to find out how often and what the timing is for when collections are going to be processed. And I would recommend getting a copy of the formal collection policy or the area of the governing documents that will state exactly how you're supposed to do collections. If they've got an approved payment plan policy, get a copy of that. And you can easily upload those into the TOPS One system, so you can always have access to them if you need to review them later. And then things that most people may not think to ask, but verifying if the board requires approval before you move it to a collection attorney. And I know that every board has different needs, so having all of that kind of outlined really helps you to quickly do your job without having to second guess what you're going to do before you do it. You know, oh, do they require that the board review this? So there's different ways you can use things like custom fields to track that information, or you can just, you know, have your checklist attached to the system. And then of course, depending upon where you have your company or where your association is, the type of foreclosures and things like that that are allowed by your state. I know we had judicial and non-judicial when I was managing in Texas, but you know, that's going to vary. So having that type of information up front is really beneficial to make sure you have everything set up correctly. And then I also want to touch base that many collection policies don't address the threshold amounts. And this is so key because they may say, hey, after 10 days, send this late letter. And then after 30 days, send the second notice. And then if you have done collection processing before, you know, you get there and you're like, well, they paid half of it. So should I really send them another late letter, or should I send them the second letter? So having something in writing from a board stating, hey, you know, when is it really necessary to kick off that next level of collections? You know, what if they paid half of their assessment? To really get that outlined so you don't have to make those decisions yourself. All right, moving on, we're going to go through how to create collection actions. I'm going to go through some samples of, you know, different levels that you can set up, but again, you're going to create these based on each of your community's governing documents or if they've got a formal collection policy. So here's a list of some sample categories for each collection level. Typically, there's either a reminder notice or it may start directly with a late notice. I would say create a list and tell yourself, okay, here's all the different notices I'm going to need to send, and here's the number of days from the due date. They're due on the 1st. After 10 days, I'll send this letter. After 30, I'll send this. And then, you know, all the way through, even if you've got attorney actions, you can set those up so that you can move those through the collection process. Even if it's not something that you're generating in-house, a letter and sending, we always tracked our attorney collections, so that way we'd always know in our system where they were in there. And another best practice is to name those things an attorney demand request or a notice of lien request. That way you know that you requested it, but as we all know, some collection attorneys don't jump on the timing, you know, like they should. So you can tell that you had a request. You don't want the system to think that when someone looks at it that the attorney's already done that action, because then it can really throw off your timing, you know, at the board meetings. Well, I thought you said they sent an attorney demand last month. So the request is always a good thing to put into these categories you're creating. So it just makes it easier to see where that status is. And then again, let's look at some additional actions that may not relate to the collection cycle. How many of you are responsible for tracking payment plans? I know those are extremely fun to keep up with. Or if you handle bankruptcies or resale statuses. And then of course, we covered the attorney actions, tracking, you know, pre-foreclosure actions or post-foreclosure actions. There's a lot of things that need to be looked at prior to that, you know, not accepting any payments, additional fees, things like that. And then one of my favorites, the temporary holds. You can use that as your catch-all bucket for, you know, those people who call and say that, you know, the check was cashed and you need to do some research. You can create different temp holds, one for disputes, one for just things like, hey, I'm going to hold it because the person said that, you know, they're out of town and something happened and they've never been late before, so let's just give this person a break. So first, let's look at creating collection actions code setup. The first thing you're going to do, once you have all your information in hand, is go to the community page. And then when you scroll down the page on the right-hand side, you're going to see a related links area. And under there, you'll see codes. And so you'll find the collection action code category once you go into the code. And then once you're, like I said, once you're in that code section, you will find the collection action code category. And there's a screenshot below that'll show you what that looks like. And if you've already got something set up in there and you want to make edits to it, of course, you'll click that edit icon. If you don't have one set up, you can click the add icon to add one. All right, so a lot of times once you go to add that, you're going to see some information on here. And a few of you may be like, I'm not really sure what a code alias is or how I set this up. So let's walk through exactly what each one of these is and how it's going to affect your system. So the alias screen is essentially a code that you see on your reports and on owner and property profile pages. So it's just a little bit of a shorter version of whatever you want to call that code name. So you could call the code Alias COL, collection, short for collections, whatever you want, whatever works for how you do business. And then of course the code name I used, pretty straightforward, collection actions. And then you don't have to put a description in, but it's nice, and it's not going to be visible on the owner side, but you'll be able to see for reference internally. Like you can put your cheat sheet notes in here of how often or what days collections are due by, or special requests by the board on how you do things, so that it's there when you review your collections. All right, so once we set those three things up, below that we're going to see the linked accounts, and you're going to see a different screenshot for each based on whether you do cash or accrual method of accounting. So you'll always want to make sure that you've got the correct linked accounts. If you're doing accrual method, the income and the receivable account. And for cash, it's just going to be the income account. And don't look at my samples. We took some information out of a demo environment, so probably not the best example based on what's in the system. But you guys will know which one of your GL accounts that each one of those is tied to. All right, moving on. Below that, once you've got that set up and your income account or income and receivable account process, then you can go into creating your collection action table. And here I try to make a little cheat sheet of what each one of these categories is, so you'll know what to put in it. So under name, this is going to be what displays on, again, the reports, owner property screen, and ledger detail. I just use a quick example there, but you can put first notice, or you can put late letter, and then it really depends on how you want to set this up. So this is just an example for you to see how to do it. And a description, this is going to display on your detailed reports, and it's where it really tells you and your team what type of letter or what stage of letter this is. And then we'll get to the most important parts. And one of the things that I want to drive home today is that you have to, in order for the collection process to work correctly in TOPS 1, you have to have a days and amount threshold entered in each one of these. Days is going to be days from the due date. How many days past the due date before you do that collection action? And then amount, again, you can do a flat amount, or you can do a percentage of assessment. So if they paid half their assessment, or 10% of their assessment, whatever that number is, before you move them to the next level. And that's going to really, I would check with your board. Some are kind of lenient, some are more stringent on moving these forward. And then if you charge a fee, an administrative fee for processing collections on each level, this is where you would add that administrative fee. So not to be confused with, like a late fee, which is a different task. This is mainly be for collection and collection fees. And there may be cases where the community charges a fee for processing collections outside of late fees. So this is where you would put that amount also. And then you've got your template. So this is going to be the template that you want to tie to each one of these actions. And we've got sample templates available in our templates on the website, and we can post that for you too. If you're interested in pulling some of those, just shoot us a note and we'll be able to provide those for you. And if you look, I've got these categories set up, but down here, there's some blank categories, and this is where you would just add another level. And also keep in mind that you have to make sure these are in corresponding order. So you can't have the third notice on the above level second notice. Make sure they go in the same order as you're going to send them out. If you do it any other way, then of course the system's going to get confused and wait a minute, 30 days and then 10 days. So always make sure they're in corresponding order. So after we've set up our actions, we're going to send our late letter, our second, our attorney demand. We're going to set up the hold categories below that. And these are going to be for our special circumstances that we don't want them to fall inside the normal collection process. And it probably is a little bit confusing, on how you're going to use these. So let's walk through exactly how it would work. So for this slide, I put a couple of amounts on there for temporary holds and for payment plan. And to ensure that the system doesn't pick up any of these on the collection process, just put a really large number of days and amounts in there. That way, you're only going to be using that when you want to assign that to an account, because these are going to be special circumstances that aren't going to fall within some window of time. It's just going to be on an as-needed basis. So now that we were talking about the hold categories, I wanted to walk through a couple examples of how you would flag these accounts. So your, request of resale, we'll use that as an example. Instead of trying to process it and manage that in a different area, you have your resale hold account set up. So you would just navigate to that property that you want to assign that status to. And under actions, you would select the edit property option. And then on that screen, you're going to see an info section, and there is a drop down under collection status. And then you will just click the one that you want to choose. And then once you do that, you can then determine, because it's going to depend, there's always a different scenario. If it's a payment plan, some hold the interest and late fees, some don't. So below that, once you select the collection status, you've got options for turning on and off hold late fee or hold delinquency notice or hold payment, which may be an important one for like pre-foreclosures, or if you want to hold AR statements for any reason. So there's a lot of options there. Just toggle them on for the ones that you need. And then once we do that, one best practice that I would always recommend, and I would have everyone in your organization do this, is if you put an account on like a temporary hold or a payment plan or whatever it is, to always add a comment to that record. So you're in that property account. So go to the record and under actions, add comment. So what that's going to let you do is enter a subject and a message and the ability to either toggle to display that comment on owner access or the account history. I would something like a 30-day collection hold. That may be something you want to share with the owner so they can see that comment when they log in. Or something like payment plan setup and put the payment plan parameters in there. First payment due in 30 days. Corresponding payments have to be received by the 15th. That way, when you're reviewing your collections, you can quickly sort the activity feed and see your comments and look up, what was the agreement with that homeowner again? Oh yeah, they're due by the 15th. Hopefully your associations have a standardized policy, but I know sometimes these can vary. So this gives you that option of really tracking and following up with these types of things. And then you'll always have that history of what happened in those comments. And for those of you who may not be really used to using the activity feeds, you've got the ability to filter by the comment and communication types. So I've highlighted that there so you can see that icon. And then you've got some additional filters like date filters if you need to do that. And you'll be able to click on the filter icon and see that information to put in specific dates that you know that it falls in. All right, now we're going to go to the review area. So now we've got everything set up. We've tested our letters. We're confident that we're ready to tackle our first one. So before we jump in and start doing things, a couple of things that I would recommend: run any reports if needed. Some of us like to have a paper report sitting next to us. Other people are perfectly fine doing things directly on screen. Just depends on your preference. And I would say the first thing is to review those accounts that have the hold collections. And there'll be different things depending on your hold categories. So you can see which ones are on payment plan. I can quickly review all those payment plans, see if they've made payments. If they haven't, I know I'm going to kick them off the payment plan status and move them forward with collections. Or if they're on hold due to a resale status, checking to see when that resale was requested, because there's going to be times when a resale falls through, or a estoppel request falls through, the home didn't sell for some reason or another. So I always gave it about a 60-day window to receive the closing paperwork. If we didn't, then it sent up the red flag for us to reach out to the title company and find out if the sale went through. And if it didn't, then we can take that off and move forward with collections if necessary. And then if it's on hold for anything like a bankruptcy, depending upon where you live, I would follow the procedures in your region based on how you handle bankruptcies. But that way that account has that status on it so that you don't move forward with accidentally, trying to do collections on the full amount that's owed. And then reviewing your temporary holds, reviewing the comments to see, hey, we gave them 30 days. They said they were going to be back in town and mail a check. We haven't received it. Boom, kicking them off of that status and moving them forward with collections. Now we're done reviewing our accounts. So now we're ready to process. So let's dig into it and see how quickly and how efficiently we're going to be able to set these up and run them. So the first thing we want to do is to navigate to the accounts receivable in the community that we want to process and select the AR and then AR collections. And then when we get to the AR collection screen, we're going to see activity. We can filter it down to see all or just a time frame. But to start a new collections batch, we'll go under actions and select the collections option. And from there, the first thing that we're going to see on the screen is going to be the collection status. So setting that, and you're going to see what community that you're in, and it's going to automatically go to the correct function, which is the collection status. So you'll need to set your effective date. Some of us don't always do collections the day they're due. It may be a day or two to after. So if you need to put the date that you were supposed to do these in, but just keep in mind, that's going to throw off your balances if payments were made after the effective date. But if it's after the late date, then people can't complain. Sorry, you still got your check in late. And I always think it's funny, and they're like, well, I sent it in by the date. And it's like, well, no, technically it's due on the 1st. We gave you 15 days of grace. So on the 16th, that means you were 16 days late, not one. Because of course we know owners are going to always try and push you to the limits to get those fees removed. And on the scheduling, you do have the option to do a one-time or to set it up as recurring. But automation webinar will go into really doing that. Today we're just going to go through really setting up and processing collections from this perspective of a one-time only. So once we had our effective date and scheduling, next thing we're going to see below that is our setting. And you've got the ability, you'll see the first bullet point is you can edit code. So if you're in there and you're like, well, I need to go back in and check, you can click into the edit codes area to make any last minute changes. But you want to toggle on and off your collection actions based on what you want to do. If you want to run through the whole collection cycle, you can do that by toggling on all of your actions. There were occasions where when we were running collections internally, we made an administrative fee off of the late notice and the second notice. So I don't have time to go through all my attorney collections today. I'll just run these first two actions and then I'll come back and run the other ones. So you can, decide how you want to manage those. And then once you have those turned on or off, you're going to see, of course, what your fees are, what your number of days threshold is, and then the last time that you processed those and the letter that's associated with them. And once we verify everything's correct, we'll click our accrue icon, and that's going to take us to our overview of after the system runs through and says, okay, I used your information and here's what I found. I found 64 properties. It's going to tell you how much it's going to put on as far as administrative fees. And if you look at it and you're like, wait, that doesn't look right. Maybe you run into a situation where they're due in 30 days, but for some reason the board said, hey, it's the holidays, wait an extra 2 weeks before doing collections. And then that just throws all your categorization into the wrong areas. You can always go back and make edits to your codes just that one time to get everybody to categorize correctly, and then go back and override it to the original state later. So just think of that as more of a fluid thing to make sure that you can get everyone in the category you need. So that way you don't have to go through and manually move people to another category. So from here, below my detail, I'm going to see all of the actual people that have been categorized. I'm going to see what I did last time, so my last action. I'm going to see what the system says, hey, based on all that criteria you gave me, here's what we think you do. And then I'll be able to see the admin fee, whether I've previously put them on a whole delinquency notice status, and their amount due, number of days. And say I'm looking in there and I'm like, oh gosh, that's that account that had something odd happen. We don't want to move them to the attorney, so I need to make an edit to this. So what I'll do is I will click on the pencil icon to edit that, and that's going to open up and let me move between collection actions. So I can say, hey, I don't want to send that one. I want to send a late letter, or I forgot they submitted a payment plan request today. So I can toggle between those, and once I select one, it's going to automatically update that admin fee based on it. And if from there I want to, hey, I really don't want to send them a notice, I'll be able to toggle that on. And after I make my changes, I'll just simply select the check mark to save those. If there's someone on there that you're like, oh gosh, that's a board member, well, I need to call them, find out why they didn't make their payment this month. I don't want to send them to a late letter because I know they're just going to yell at me at the board meeting. So I can go in and delete action from there. So I'll just click the icon for removing that off of the collection processing at all. Or I can close out of it. Oh, you know what? I am going to leave it on, the attorney demand. I can just click the X to close out of that without making changes. And then once I get all of my accounts in the correct categories, I'm confident I'm ready to go. A couple of things I can do. If I go to my actions, I can add a comment to that whole entire collection batch. I want to say, hey, these were a day behind because we had a problem with the lockbox file uploading, or whatever you want to put in there, so that you've got access to the history of why you do certain things or why it may not have fallen in the correct timing. Or you can say, I want to create a follow-up task. I need to remember that I'm going to check on my payment plans 2 days before, so I don't have to do it all the day I'm trying to process my collections. You can also print preview. That's going to give you a report of all of the actions that you've taken prior to posting, so you can take a look at those if you just like to have that printed report. Or you can say, you know what, this is not what I wanted to do. I just need to start all over. I can delete that batch. So now we pulled the trigger and we hit that post button. So now we're going to go to the posted transaction view, and it's going to give me an overview of what I've done. And then below, under the transaction summary, it will break out all the different notices. And if you click on any of those, it'll show you the candidates that each got posted to that category. It'll tell you how much you posted in administrative fees. It'll tell you how many properties. And then from there, under your actions, you've got the ability to, again, add a task or print reports. And you'll notice the new option in there is print letters. So you can go there to print your letters once they have finished generating. And depending on how big your community is, it may take a while for those to generate, if you've got hundreds of letters that need to be processed. So once the system's processing, it'll notify you in your notifications icon bell that those are ready to go. Or you can leave the screen open, open another browser and wait for those. It just depends on how you like to do things. And additionally, I wanted to go over other ways that you can get back to that information. So if I close that screen out, I can't remember, I can't get back there. How do I go back to that same screen? What you would do is go to your AR from the navigation menu and go back into collections. And then that's where your activity page is. And that activity page, if you're not seeing anything, you're going to need to select that little filter icon, the blue one. Always look for that. That's going to expand all the different date options. And you can see, if you click all and apply, you can see every collection batch that you've ever done, or I can just see a specific time frame. But if you notice there, I've got one that I just did highlighted. So if I want to expand it, I'm going to see all the detail of all of my collections and all the people that got the notices. Or if I want to go into that activity again, I would just click on the underlined area AR and the transaction number. And that's going to take you back in to have a lot more access to see the information. So again, there's multiple ways you can view these things and see the letters all through your activity view or through the actual owner account view or property view. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions. Okay, one of the questions we got was in regards to seeing the comments, being able to access those without going into the activity feed. Currently, that is the way that you can access those. I know that we've had some people request that we have reporting on them, so I know that's something that I'm definitely pushing for to get through development, and so I'll keep you all posted for when that comes out. But like I said, you can use that filter for the communications, and that'll really help to only see those comments based on what you're looking for instead of all the activity for that community or that property. Okay, we had another question regarding the admin fee and how to process late fees. Late fees would, and I always try to think of it as, these things all are collection actions that stack on top of each other, because late fees can be run anytime. They really don't correlate directly with collections. I've had communities that I've managed that have late fees monthly, but they only send a collection letter quarterly. So think of those as two separate items. So on your collection piece, you'll only want the administrative fees. And on your late fees, process those under the late fee option. And we'll definitely be able to help you. If you want to leave your contact information, we'll reach out to you on how to set those late fees up and process those. And you can automate those. There's a lot of different options to make it easier for you. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.